When a cocky karate champion walked into that community center, he had no idea he was about to challenge Donnie Yen in disguise. The arrogant fighter spotted an old janitor cleaning the floors and saw easy prey. What started as cruel mockery of a helpless veteran quickly spiraled into public humiliation that made everyone's blood boil. But when the quiet maintenance worker stepped forward to defend his friend, something shifted in the air. The bully laughed, thinking he'd found another victim to destroy on camera for his millions of followers. He issued his challenge with a smirk. "Fight me, old man, or watch everyone here suffer." The janitor accepted with deadly calm. What the champion didn't know was that the humble man mopping floors was actually Donnie Yen himself, the legendary martial arts master who had vanished from the world years ago. As they squared off that evening, the cocky fighter threw his first punch expecting easy victory. Instead, he found himself facing movements so fast, so precise, that the crowd fell silent in shock. Because sometimes, the most dangerous warriors are the ones who choose to sweep floors instead of breaking bones. But when innocents are threatened, the sleeping dragon awakens. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The black Escalade's chrome wheels caught the afternoon sun as it pulled up to the Sunset District Community Center at exactly 2:47 p.m. Derek, the destroyer, Kellerman emerged from the passenger side like he owned the world, his gold chains catching the light as he surveyed the modest building with obvious disdain. "This dump is where we're filming." He adjusted his designer workout gear, the fabric straining against muscles pumped full of enhancement drugs. "Rick, you said this was a real gym." His manager, Rick Valdez, scrambled out behind him, phone already recording. "Trust me, Derek. The contrast is perfect. Champion fighter helping underprivileged kids. The optics are incredible." Kellerman's entourage followed. Cameraman Joey Park lugging professional equipment, and two sparring partners whose steroid-enhanced frames barely fit through the center's modest doorway. Inside, the lobby smelled of industrial cleaner and coffee from the senior citizens' afternoon social hour. Maria Santos looked up from her desk, her warm smile faltering as she took in the invasion. At 42, she'd managed the community center for 8 years, but nothing had prepared her for this level of manufactured chaos. "Mr. Kellerman?" She stood, clipboard in hand. "I'm Maria, the director. We spoke about the demonstration. Yeah, whatever. Where's the gym?" Kellerman was already moving, his crew trailing behind like eager hyenas. "And get these old people out of here. We need space to work." In the main gymnasium, elderly patrons playing cards at folding tables looked up nervously as the invasion began. Kellerman's crew immediately started moving equipment, shoving tables aside without asking permission. The afternoon quiet shattered under the weight of expensive cameras and aggressive voices. "This is perfect," Rick announced, filming everything. "Derek, the destroyer, Kellerman brings hope to San Francisco's forgotten community. The engagement will be massive." Kellerman stripped off his warm-up jacket, revealing tattoos that covered his arms like a roadmap of violence. His previous MMA victory had come through a controversial late hit that left his opponent hospitalized, but his social media followers ate up the brutality. "All right, listen up." His voice boomed through the gymnasium. "I'm here to show you what real fighting looks like. Maybe teach some of you old-timers about respect." 74-year-old Frank Castellano, mopping near the corner, tried to work around the chaos. His arthritis made the simple task difficult, but he'd been cleaning these floors for 3 years with quiet pride. The Korean War veteran moved carefully, his weathered hands steady despite the joint pain. "Hey, Grandpa." Kellerman's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Speed it up with that mop. We're trying to work here." Frank looked up, his military bearing evident, even bent over cleaning supplies. "Begging your pardon, sir. I'll be finished shortly." "Shortly?" Kellerman's laugh was cruel. "How about now?" The gymnasium fell silent. Maria started forward from the doorway, but Rick blocked her path, camera rolling. In the corner, barely visible in his Navy maintenance uniform, Danny Wong continued cleaning. With methodical precision, his movements were fluid despite his 61 years, but everyone saw only another invisible janitor. Only Danny's eyes revealed the truth, calculating, alert, missing nothing. Danny Wong had perfected the art of invisibility over 6 months at the Sunset District Community Center. To everyone else, he was simply another aging maintenance worker, stooped shoulders, work-weathered hands, the kind of man society trained itself not to see. But invisibility was a choice, not a limitation. He moved through the gymnasium with practiced efficiency, his mop creating perfect arcs across the hardwood floor. Each step displayed unconscious grace, his posture subtly perfect despite the deliberately humble appearance. The simple navy uniform and worn sneakers completed the illusion, but his eyes tracked every detail with tactical precision. Kellerman's setup revealed everything Danny needed to know. The fighter's stance showed formal training corrupted by poor discipline, all flash, no foundation. His crew displayed the telltale signs of steroid abuse, oversized muscle mass, aggressive posturing, and the twitchy energy of chemical enhancement. The expensive camera equipment suggested this was more than a simple charity visit. Danny had seen this pattern before, in Hong Kong's criminal underworld. Young predators using manufactured authority to prey on the vulnerable, cameras rolling. To capture humiliation for profit, his trained eye cataloged the gymnasium's exits, potential weapons, and defensive positions while maintaining the facade of simple custodial work. The afternoon light streaming through high windows created perfect angles for observation, and Danny positioned himself to monitor everything while appearing focused only on cleaning. Frank Castellano struggled with his own mop 20 feet away, his arthritis making the work painful, but his military pride refusing to quit. Danny had watched the 74-year-old veteran for months, noting the careful way he hid his pain, the dignity with which he approached even humble work. The old soldier reminded Danny of his own grandfather, a man who'd faced Japanese occupation with quiet courage, never complaining about hardship, but never backing down from what was right. Kellerman's voice grew louder, more aggressive as he demonstrated flashy combinations for his cameras. The elderly patrons at their card tables watched nervously, sensing predatory energy but uncertain how to respond. Maria Santos hovered near the entrance, her protective instincts warring with legal concerns about the signed contract. Danny's knuckles were scarred from decades of conditioning, but his hands remained steady on the mop handle. Calluses told stories of training that would have broken lesser men, yet he used those same hands now for gentle maintenance work. The contradiction was deliberate, a legendary warrior choosing service over violence. But some choices could be revoked. As Kellerman's demonstration grew more aggressive, Danny found himself unconsciously shifting position. Still cleaning, still invisible, but now between the bully and the most vulnerable community members. His movements appeared coincidental, but tactical awareness guided every step. The gymnasium's familiar sounds, squeaking sneakers, bouncing balls, quiet conversation, gave way to Kellerman's manufactured drama. Danny had built relationships here through patient service, teaching children respect, listening to elders' stories, maintaining the spaces where community flourished. Now a predator threatened that peace. Danny's breathing remained controlled, his expression unchanged, but something fundamental shifted in his awareness. The sleeping dragon hadn't awakened yet, but it had opened one eye. "All right, everybody, gather around." Kellerman's voice commanded the gymnasium like a drill sergeant addressing recruits. "Time to see what real fighting looks like." The crowd assembled reluctantly, 30 people including elderly regulars clutching their coffee cups, mothers with children who'd come for after-school programs, and teenagers drawn by the commotion. Rick positioned himself for optimal camera angles while Joey live-streamed to Kellerman's 2.3 million followers. "Today we're going to talk about respect," Kellerman announced, flexing his tattooed arms. "About knowing your place in the food chain." His demonstration began with basic combinations, jabs, crosses, kicks designed more for visual impact than practical application. The crowd watched with polite attention, most having no context for evaluating technique, but sensing the underlying aggression in every movement. Danny continued his methodical cleaning, now positioned where he could observe both the demonstration and all exit points. His trained eye cataloged Kellerman's genuine skills alongside his obvious weaknesses: good conditioning but poor balance, adequate speed but telegraphed intentions. "Now, I need a volunteer," Kellerman announced, scanning the crowd with predatory calculation. Someone to help demonstrate proper respect for authority. His gaze landed on Frank Castellano, still working quietly in the corner. The contrast was perfect for viral content. Young champion versus helpless elderly man. You there, Grandpa? Come here. Frank looked up, confusion evident in his weathered features. Sir? I said come here. Time for your lesson. The gymnasium fell silent as Frank approached, his military bearing evident despite his age and physical limitations. He'd faced enemy fire in Korea with less trepidation than he felt walking toward this manufactured confrontation. What's your name, old-timer? Frank Castellano, sir. Korean war veteran. Kellerman's laugh was designed for maximum humiliation. A war hero. Even better. Tell me, Frank, what did they teach you about respect in the army? That it's earned through service and sacrifice, sir. Wrong answer. Kellerman's voice turned cold. Respect comes from strength, from knowing who's in charge. What happened next would haunt everyone present. Kellerman grabbed Frank's shoulder, using leverage and surprise to force the 74-year-old veteran to his knees on the hardwood floor. The old man's face flushed with shame as his dignity crumbled in front of neighbors and friends. This is respect, Kellerman announced to his cameras. Understanding your place. Frank's arthritis made kneeling agony, but worse was the humiliation. Proud men who'd served their country weren't meant to grovel before bullies while cameras recorded their degradation. Now say thank you for the lesson. The gymnasium held its collective breath. Maria started forward, but Rick threatened legal action if she interfered with their contracted demonstration. Elderly patrons watched in horror as their friend was systematically broken down for entertainment. Please, Frank whispered, his voice barely audible. I just want to finish my work. Louder. Thank you, Frank said, tears beginning in his eyes. Thank you for the lesson. Danny's mop handle cracked under the pressure of his grip. In the corner, invisible to the cameras and crowd, the legend they'd forgotten was remembering why some men chose violence. Not for glory or profit, but because some lines could never be uncrossed. Frank struggled to stand, his knees shaking from pain and humiliation. That's when Danny finally moved, crossing the gymnasium with fluid steps to gently help the old veteran to his feet. Danny's touch was gentle, but his voice carried quiet authority that cut through the gymnasium's tension like a blade. Apologize to him. Kellerman turned, seeing only another aging janitor, but sensing something that made his predatory instincts pause. Danny stood barely 5'8" to Kellerman's 6'2", wearing the same humble maintenance uniform, but the air around him had changed. Excuse me, old man. You heard me. Danny's voice remained calm, measured, but everyone in the gymnasium felt the shift. Apologize to Mr. Castellano for your disrespect. Kellerman's laugh was designed to break the moment, but it sounded forced. Are you serious? Do you know who I am? I know what you are. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Rick immediately started filming, sensing viral gold, while Joey adjusted his livestream angle. The crowd pressed closer, elderly patrons and teenagers alike drawn by the unexpected confrontation. I'm Derek, the Destroyer Kellerman, two-time MMA champion. I've got 3 million followers who watch me break people like you for breakfast. Danny helped Frank steady himself, the old veteran's dignity slowly returning under the protection of unexpected support. Then you should understand the value of honor. Honor. Kellerman stepped forward, using his height advantage to tower over Danny. You want to talk about honor, you pathetic old fool? Look around. This is the modern world. Strength makes the rules. Social media decides who matters. And nobodies like you and your war hero friend are just taking up space. The crowd murmured angrily, but Kellerman was building momentum now, feeding off the cameras and his own manufactured outrage. You represent everything wrong with your generation, he continued, getting in Danny's face. Weak, outdated, living in the past while real men like me shape the future. Maybe you need the same lesson I just gave Grandpa there. Danny remained perfectly still, his breathing controlled, his expression unchanged. But something in his eyes made Kellerman unconsciously. Step back. I'll make you a deal, old man, Kellerman announced, turning to play to his cameras. Fight me. Right here, right now. Show everyone what your generation's made of. The gymnasium erupted in nervous chatter. Maria pushed through Rick's blockade, desperation in her voice. Please, both of you. This doesn't have to. Or, Kellerman continued, his voice rising over the noise. I make sure every old fool in this place gets the same treatment as your friend Frank. Starting with that lady there. He pointed at Mrs. Betty Chun, 78 years old and barely 90 pounds, who clutched her purse with frightened hands. The threat hung in the air like poison. Danny looked at Frank's humiliated face, then at the frightened elderly patrons. Finally at the children who'd begun crying from the aggressive atmosphere. His decision crystallized with crystal clarity. I accept. The words were spoken quietly, but they silenced the gymnasium completely. Kellerman's triumph was immediate and loud. This is perfect. The old janitor thinks he's tough. He turned to Rick. Make sure you get everything. This is going to break the internet. Danny raised one finger, a simple gesture that somehow commanded attention from everyone present. One condition, he said calmly. After 6 p.m., when the children's programs end, no kids should see violence. Even in accepting a fight, his priority remained protecting the innocent. Kellerman initially balked, wanting immediate gratification for his cameras, but Rick saw the marketing potential in building anticipation. Deal, Kellerman announced. 6 o'clock tonight, old man. Time to learn what real power looks like. As the crowd began to disperse, buzzing with nervous energy and disbelief, Danny quietly returned to his cleaning. But Frank Castellano, his dignity partially restored by unexpected protection, watched the humble maintenance worker with new eyes. Something about the way Danny moved, the controlled stillness in his face, reminded Frank of the most dangerous men he'd known in Korea, the quiet ones who never started fights, but always finished them. Danny's single condition hung in the air like a sacred covenant. After 6 p.m., when the children's programs end, no kids should see violence. Kellerman's initial frustration was obvious. He wanted immediate gratification, instant viral content for his hungry followers. But Rick's marketing instincts kicked in, recognizing the promotional goldmine of building anticipation. Actually, this works better, Rick announced, already calculating engagement metrics. We'll promote it for 3 hours. Old-timer thinks he can fight the destroyer. The build-up will be incredible. Danny's request revealed everything about his character. Even accepting a confrontation he neither wanted nor needed, his first thought was protecting innocence. The afternoon children's programs included 43 kids aged 6 to 15, many from troubled homes who found safety and mentorship within these walls. You got heart, old man. I'll give you that. Kellerman's grin was predatory. But heart don't mean much when you're getting your face rearranged for my cameras. As word spread through the community center, reactions varied dramatically. Elderly patrons gathered in worried clusters, most fearing for Danny's safety against a professional fighter 33 years younger. A few veterans like Harold Kim whispered among themselves, something familiar nagging at their memories about Danny's stance and movement. Maria tried repeatedly to intervene, calling local police only to discover that both men had signed legal waivers Rick had prepared with suspicious foresight. Her protective instincts screamed danger, but bureaucratic reality tied her hands. Danny, please reconsider, she pleaded as he continued his methodical cleaning. This isn't worth proving some point. It's not about proving anything, Danny replied quietly, wringing out his mop with the same precision he applied to everything. Some lines can't be crossed without consequence. Frank Castellano approached hesitantly, his earlier humiliation burning like acid in his chest. This is my fault. If I hadn't, Mr. Castellano. Danny's gentle interruption carried absolute finality. You did nothing wrong. A man shouldn't apologize for existing. The afternoon dragged with surreal tension. Kellerman's crew prepared elaborate camera setups while posting teasers on social media. Watch the destroyer school another old-timer who doesn't know his place. The responses were predictably savage, thousands of comments anticipating violence, betting on how quickly the old fool would fold. By 5:45 p.m., the last child had been picked up and adult spectators began arriving. Word had spread beyond the community center through social media and neighborhood networks. The modest gymnasium filled with an unlikely crowd, elderly regulars, younger adults drawn by viral curiosity, and Kellerman's growing entourage of hangers-on. Danny changed from his work uniform into simple black pants and a white t-shirt in the supply closet, His transformation subtle but profound. The stooped shoulders straightened slightly. The humble shuffle became fluid movement, though most observers still saw only an aging maintenance worker preparing for inevitable humiliation. Maria found him in those final moments, noting details she'd somehow missed in 6 months of daily interaction. The perfect posture, the controlled breathing, the hands that moved with unconscious precision. "Danny, what aren't you telling me?" He looked at her with eyes that seemed infinitely older than his years. "Some stories are better left untold, Maria. But after tonight, you'll understand why I came here seeking peace." At exactly 6 p.m., Kellerman's voice boomed across the gymnasium. "Ready to embarrass yourself, old man?" The gymnasium lights adjusted for optimal filming created an arena atmosphere that transformed the community space into something alien and hostile. 50 spectators pressed against the walls, their nervous energy mixing anticipation with dread as two vastly different men prepared to face each other. Kellerman had stripped to fight shorts, his muscled physique on full display for the cameras. Tattoos covered his arms and torso like battle scars from a war fought entirely for attention. At 28, he represented everything modern society celebrated: youth, aggression, social media dominance, and the belief that strength made right. Danny remained in his simple white t-shirt and black pants, the contrast deliberate and profound. Where Kellerman projected manufactured intimidation, Danny radiated quiet certainty. The 6 months Maria had observed him suddenly crystallized into recognition of patterns she'd missed. She remembered how children gravitated toward him naturally, sensing safety in his presence. Troubled teenagers found themselves confessing problems to the soft-spoken janitor, receiving guidance that somehow always proved exactly right. Elderly patrons lit up when Danny approached, though none could articulate why his attention felt so valuable. His encyclopedic knowledge of martial arts philosophy, which she'd attributed to enthusiast study, now seemed suspiciously comprehensive. The meditation garden he'd designed demonstrated understanding of principles she'd assumed came from books, not decades of practical application. "You sure about this, old-timer?" Kellerman bounced on his toes, shadowboxing for his cameras. "Last chance to walk away before I make you famous for all the wrong reasons." Danny's response was to bow slightly, a gesture of respect that confused the younger fighter but sent ripples of recognition through the elderly Korean War veterans present. Harold Kim straightened in his folding chair, something nagging at his memory. Rick positioned cameras for maximum drama, while Joey live-streamed to rapidly growing audiences. The viewer count climbed past 100,000 as word spread across social media platforms. Comments flooded in, overwhelmingly predicting swift, brutal humiliation for the crazy old janitor. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rick announced like a carnival. "Barker, you're about to witness Derek, the Destroyer, Kellerman demonstrate why respect must be earned through strength." The makeshift ring was simply the gymnasium's center court, no ropes or formal boundaries. Kellerman began circling immediately, his footwork flashy but tactically questionable. Danny remained motionless in the center, his breathing controlled, his stance deceptively casual. Maria noticed details others missed: how Danny positioned himself to observe all exits, how his apparent stillness masked constant micro-adjustments to maintain optimal balance. His hands hung loosely at his sides, but she'd watched those same hands perform precise maintenance work for months, never wasting motion, never making mistakes. The contrast extended beyond physical appearance. Kellerman fed off crowd energy, playing to cameras, building his brand even in combat. Danny had already withdrawn into some internal space where external validation meant nothing, where only the purity of technique mattered. Frank Castellano watched from his chair near the wall, his earlier humiliation transforming into something else as he observed the man who defended his dignity. Military instincts honed in Korea whispered warnings about underestimating quiet men who moved with unconscious precision. At exactly 3 minutes past 6, Kellerman stopped circling and assumed his fighting stance, hands raised, weight bouncing, everything designed for cameras rather than efficiency. Danny simply stood there, patient as stone, waiting for violence to begin so he could demonstrate why truly dangerous men rarely needed to prove anything to anyone. The gymnasium held its breath as two philosophies prepared to collide. The first exchange lasted exactly 37 seconds and changed everything. Kellerman opened with basic boxing combinations, textbook jabs and crosses designed to establish dominance quickly for his cameras. His technique was competent, his power obvious, his confidence absolute as he threw everything with knockout intention. None of it touched Danny. The defense was so subtle that most spectators needed several seconds to process what they were witnessing. Danny's movements appeared minimal, slight shifts of his center line, tiny adjustments of distance, gentle deflections with his forearms that redirected Kellerman's power into empty air. Wing Chun's core principle made manifest. Use the opponent's force against them while expending minimal energy yourself. Kellerman's confusion was immediate and visible. His punches felt heavy, off balance, as if the air itself was redirecting his attacks. He increased his aggression, throwing harder combinations, but Danny's response remained maddeningly consistent. Perfect deflection, no counters, no wasted motion. The crowd's nervous chatter died completely. This wasn't the one-sided beating they'd expected, but something far more unsettling. The professional fighter was being systematically neutralized by techniques most had never seen outside of movies. What the hell? Kellerman gasped, his breathing already labored from throwing full-power strikes that accomplished nothing. Danny remained silent, his expression unchanged, his breathing barely elevated. Each deflection demonstrated decades of conditioning. Forearms like iron, timing perfected through endless repetition, distance control that seemed almost supernatural. Harold Kim gripped his folding chair's armrest, memories flooding back from Hong Kong military theaters in the 1970s. That movement, that style, the effortless precision, he'd seen it before on silver screens when legendary fighters still graced the world. Rick frantically adjusted camera angles, sensing that viral content was being created but unsure whether it favored his client. The livestream viewer count exploded past 200,000 as word spread through social media that something extraordinary was happening. Kellerman attempted a takedown, using his size advantage to grapple, but found himself grasping air as Danny's footwork kept him precisely out of range. The younger man's frustration grew with each failed attempt, his tactical discipline crumbling under the weight of public humiliation. "Stand still and fight, you coward." Danny's response was to shift slightly left, causing Kellerman's next haymaker to swing wide by inches while demonstrating the subtle hip movement that made Wing Chun so devastatingly effective. The deflection was so gentle it seemed accidental, but martial artists would recognize the master-level technique required. Frank Castellano found himself leaning forward, his military training recognizing tactical superiority when he saw it. This wasn't lucky defense. This was systematic dismantling of a supposedly superior opponent through pure skill. Maria watched Danny's face throughout the exchange, noting the absence of aggression or ego. His expression remained serene, almost meditative, as if violence was simply another form of work requiring proper technique and patience. 3 minutes passed without Danny throwing a single offensive technique. 3 minutes of perfect defense that made a professional fighter look amateurish, while barely elevating the defender's heart rate. The gymnasium had fallen into stunned silence, broken only by Kellerman's increasingly desperate breathing and the quiet shuffle of Danny's feet on hardwood. When the informal round ended, Kellerman stood gasping and confused while Danny appeared ready to continue for hours. The contrast was devastating. Youth and aggression made impotent by wisdom and technique. "Lucky," Kellerman panted, but his voice carried doubt for the first time. In the crowd, Harold Kim whispered words that would change everything. "Sweet Jesus, I know that style." Kellerman's second assault abandoned all pretense of technique for pure rage-fueled aggression. The humiliation of being neutralized by an aging janitor while 250,000 viewers watched live broke whatever discipline he'd maintained. "I'll kill you, old man." He launched himself forward with everything. Elbows, knees, wild combinations designed to overwhelm through sheer violence. His social media brand demanded dominance, and professional pride couldn't survive another round of effortless defense. For the first time, Danny moved with his true speed. The transformation was so sudden, so complete, that the gymnasium gasped. Collectively, What had appeared to be an aging maintenance worker revealed itself as something else entirely. Fluid motion that seemed to bend physics, precision that made professional fighters look clumsy by comparison. The sequence lasted exactly 15 seconds, but would be replayed millions of times across the internet. Danny's hand moved with snake-like speed, simultaneously trapping Kellerman's leading arm while striking a pressure point that disrupted his opponent's balance. The technique was so advanced that most viewers missed the subtlety, seeing only Kellerman suddenly stumbling forward off balance. The sweep that followed was pure poetry, a simple ankle pick that used Kellerman's momentum against him, sending the younger man crashing to the hardwood with Danny's hand stopping 1 inch from his throat in a perfect finishing position. Kellerman lay stunned, his earlier bravado completely shattered. The gymnasium fell silent except for the sound of his labored breathing and the soft shuffle of Danny's feet as he stepped back. "Impossible," someone whispered. But Harold Kim was already standing, his 87-year-old frame trembling with recognition and awe. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Sweet Jesus, that's Donnie Yen." The name rippled through the crowd like electricity. Younger viewers frantically Googled on their phones while older patrons stared in shock. The legendary martial artist, the icon who'd vanished from public life years ago, had been cleaning their floors for 6 months. Danny helped Kellerman too, his feet with the same gentleness he'd shown Frank earlier, but his eyes carried a warning that needed no translation. The bully's transformation was complete, from predator to humbled student in less than 4 minutes. The technique, Harold continued, his voice filled with reverence. "I saw him use it in Iron Monkey at the Base Theater in Hong Kong, 1978. That's Donnie Yen." Social media exploded as the recognition spread. Hashtag Donnie Yen began trending worldwide. Within minutes, the humble janitor's true identity crashed through the internet like a tsunami, transforming a local confrontation into global phenomenon. Rick's cameras had captured everything, but now he faced the reality that his client had just been systematically destroyed by a living legend. The viral content was beyond his wildest dreams, but not in the way he'd planned. Danny walked toward the gymnasium exit as the crowd parted instinctively, their whispers following him like prayers. Frank Castellano struggled to his feet, wanting to thank the man who defended his dignity, but words seemed inadequate. "Mr. Ewan," Harold called out, using Danny's real name with infinite respect. Danny paused at the doorway, turning back to face the community he'd served in secret. His cover was blown, his peaceful existence shattered, but something in his expression suggested this outcome hadn't been entirely unexpected. "Please," he said quietly, his voice carrying the authority that came with legendary status. "I came here seeking peace. I hope you'll help me keep it." The gymnasium remained silent as he disappeared into the evening, leaving behind a room full of people who'd just witnessed the impossible, a legend among them, hidden in plain sight, choosing service over celebrity, until conscience demanded otherwise. Outside, the sleeping dragon had awakened, and there would be consequences. Dawn broke over the Sunset District to find a line of people waiting outside the community center at 7:30 a.m. Word of the previous night's revelation had spread through social media like wildfire, drawing elderly patrons, local reporters, curious neighbors, and martial arts enthusiasts from across the Bay Area. Maria arrived to chaos. Joey's livestream had exploded to 3.2 million views overnight, with countless reaction videos and news outlets picking up the story. Legendary Donnie Yen, found working as janitor, dominated headlines from Hong Kong to Hollywood. Inside, she found Danny in his maintenance uniform, calmly preparing for his regular workday as if nothing had changed. He was filling his supply cart with the same methodical precision he'd shown for 6 months, but now Maria understood that every movement carried decades of disciplined training. "Danny, there are reporters outside," she said gently. "The whole world knows." He nodded, without surprise. "I expected this." Harold Kim led a delegation of Korean War veterans through the back entrance, their aged faces showing deep respect. These men had faced enemy fire and survived decades of hardship, but they approached Danny like pilgrims meeting a saint. "Master Ewan," Harold began formally, "we saw your films in military theaters across Asia. You gave us heroes when we needed them most." Other veterans shared their stories. watching his movies during lonely deployments, finding inspiration in characters who fought for justice rather than glory. For them, discovering their humble janitor was actually their childhood hero felt like a miracle. Danny listened with patience and grace, but his discomfort was obvious. I'm honored, truly, but I came here seeking something different from fame. Through careful conversation with Maria, the truth emerged. Danny's real name was Daniel Yuan, and Danny Wong was his witness protection identity. After exposing corruption in Hong Kong's underground fighting circuits, he'd entered federal protection and chosen this humble life deliberately. The FBI relocated me here because the Sunset District's elderly Chinese population provided perfect camouflage, he explained. I could disappear into anonymity while serving others. Maria began understanding details she'd missed: his extensive knowledge of multiple languages when helping diverse community members, his uncanny ability to calm troubled children, his instinctive positioning to observe exits and potential threats. Why maintenance work? She asked. Because it's honest service without recognition. After decades of violence, even justified violence, I needed to build rather than destroy. Harold organized the veterans to deflect media attention, creating a protective barrier around their discovered legend. They understood better than anyone the value of peace after war. But Danny's expression carried worry that hadn't been there before. If the wrong people find out I'm here, he told Maria quietly, everyone I've grown to care about could be in danger. His past included more than corrupt fight promoters, triads, international criminals, people who would kill to settle old scores or claim the bounty his head still carried in certain circles. As photographers pressed against windows and reporters shouted questions, Danny continued his work with serene determination. But Maria noticed him checking exits more frequently, his awareness heightened beyond even its usual exceptional level. The sleeping dragon had awakened, and dangerous dreams were stirring in distant places. Derek Kellerman's downtown penthouse felt like a tomb at 11:47 a.m. News coverage of his humiliation played on every screen: CNN, ESPN, TMZ, all dissecting his defeat by the mysterious maintenance worker revealed to be legendary Donnie Yen. His social media accounts hemorrhaged followers while comments poured in with brutal mockery. Destroyed by a janitor. Fake champion exposed. The memes were already spreading faster than he could delete them. Rick Valdez fielded desperate calls from sponsors threatening contract cancellations. Derek, the destroyer Kellerman, had become a punchline overnight, his carefully crafted brand demolished by 15 seconds of superior technique. We need damage control, Rick muttered, but his own credibility was shattered. How do you spin getting outclassed by a legend in disguise? Kellerman stared at his reflection, seeing his career crumbling in real time. The controversial victory that built his reputation now seemed pathetic compared to facing genuine martial arts mastery. His enhanced physique, his aggressive persona, his manufactured dominance, all revealed as hollow theater. In desperation, he made the call that would change everything. Vinny, Torino answered on the second ring, his voice carrying the cool authority that had built a criminal empire across 3 decades. The 52-year-old operated from a legitimate-looking gym in the Mission District, but his true power extended through underground fighting circuits, human trafficking, and money laundering operations spanning the Pacific Rim. I saw the video, Torino said before Kellerman could speak. Interesting development. Vinny, I need help. My career's finished. Sponsors are dropping me. I'm a laughingstock. Torino's silence stretched long enough to make Kellerman sweat. When he finally spoke, his tone had shifted completely. Tell me everything about this janitor. His name's Danny Wong, but apparently he's really Donnie Yen, the actual legend, not some impersonator. He's been hiding at that community center for months. Donnie Yen. Torino's voice carried new calculation. Do you understand what you've just handed me? Kellerman's confusion was obvious. What do you mean? Forget your pathetic career, Torino continued. You've discovered something worth more than any championship. Forcing Donnie Yen into my underground tournament would generate betting pools in the hundreds of millions. From his office overlooking the Mission District, Torino gazed at photographs covering one wall. Images of fighters he controlled, criminals he did business with, politicians and judges he owned. But none represented the opportunity now presenting itself. Chinese triads would bet 50 million just to see him fight, he explained. Russian bratva, Mexican cartels, Japanese yakuza, every major criminal organization in the Pacific would want action on Donnie Yen matches. His lieutenant Marcus Webb entered carrying files on the community center, Danny's background, and everyone connected to the situation. Torino's organization moved quickly when opportunities arose. But he's retired, Kellerman protested. Living some peaceful life. Torino's laugh was cold steel. Nobody retires from violence, Derek. They just find new reasons to return to it. The plan formed quickly in Torino's mind. Not salvaging Kellerman's career, that was finished, but using the disgraced fighter as an entry point to pressure the legend himself. Your new job is simple, Torino explained. Make Donnie Yen's peaceful life impossible. Force him into my ring by any means necessary. Kellerman received his orders along with a crew of professional enforcers disguised as training partners. Their mission wasn't to fight the legend directly. That would come later, under controlled circumstances where maximum profit could be extracted. Their job was to make him choose violence. As Kellerman left the meeting, Torino was already making international calls. Word would spread through criminal networks worldwide. The legendary Donnie Yen was accessible, and Vincent Torino controlled the path to him. The betting pools would be astronomical. Tuesday afternoon brought the first signs of systematic harassment. Kellerman arrived at the community center at 2:15 p.m. with 3 new companions. Marcus Webb's enforcers disguised as training partners, their legitimate gym credentials masking criminal resumes. Danny observed from inside, recognizing professional muscle immediately. These weren't social media hangers-on or misguided fans. Their movements, positioning, and careful observation of security measures marked them as operators with specific objectives. The harassment began subtly. Kellerman's crew blocked elderly patrons from entering, claiming they needed space for training demonstrations. They made excessive noise during children's programs, disrupting reading time and homework help with aggressive shouting and equipment dropping. Mrs. Betty Chun, 78 and barely 90 pounds, was accidentally bumped in the parking lot, her groceries scattered across the asphalt. When Harold Kim tried to help her, one of Kellerman's new companions suggested the old man mind his own business. Throughout the week, the pressure escalated with professional precision. Graffiti appeared overnight, not random vandalism, but targeted messages. Old man can't hide forever. Cowards get what they deserve. The words were sprayed where security cameras had mysterious malfunctions. Car tires were slashed in the parking lot. Always vehicles belonging to elderly patrons who'd been present during the fight. The pattern was clear to anyone with tactical awareness, systematic intimidation designed to isolate the primary target by making association with him dangerous. Danny tried handling it quietly, appearing at strategic moments to deter harassment through presence alone. His reputation now preceded him, and most of Kellerman's crew backed down when he materialized silently behind their aggressive confrontations. But they always returned when he wasn't watching. Maria discovered broken windows Thursday morning, replaced them by noon, then found them broken again Friday. Equipment in the children's play area was subtly damaged, nothing obviously sabotaged, but swings that squeaked ominously, climbing structures with loose bolts, safety mats displaced just enough to create hazards. The community responded with growing fear. Attendance dropped as elderly patrons became afraid to visit. Parents pulled children from after-school programs. The vibrant social ecosystem Danny had quietly protected for 6 months was being systematically destroyed. This is about you, Maria told him directly. They want something, and they're hurting innocent people to get it. Danny's jaw tightened. I know. Harold Kim organized the Korean War veterans into informal security patrols, but Danny refused their help. You've all earned your peace. This isn't your fight. It is if they're threatening our community, Harold replied with military determination. The harassment reached its crescendo Friday evening when Kellerman's crew cornered Mrs. Betty Chun in the parking lot as she tried to reach her car. The 80-year-old woman fell while trying to escape their questions about her janitor friend. Danny arrived as she lay on the asphalt, her purse contents scattered, her dignity shattered by fear. The crew was gone, but their message was clear: anyone connected to Donnie Yen would suffer until he gave them what they wanted. For the first time since the fight, Danny's calm facade cracked. His hands trembled as he helped Mrs. Chun to her feet, not from fear, but from suppressed rage that threatened to consume his carefully maintained peace. As he guided her safely to her car, Kellerman's crew watched from across the street, phones, recording everything for their boss. The legend was breaking down, his protective instincts warring with his desire for peaceful existence. Vincent Torino would be pleased with their progress. The sight of Mrs. Betty Chun lying on the asphalt triggered memories Danny had spent years trying to bury. As he helped the frightened elderly woman to her car, his hands trembled with suppressed rage that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with a protective fury he'd hoped never to feel again. Mrs. Chun reminded him of his own grandmother, who'd hidden him during Japanese occupation raids in Hong Kong. Her dignity, her quiet strength, her vulnerability in the face of predatory violence, all echoed across decades to the 12-year-old boy who'd sworn to protect the innocent. But it was Miguel Santos who truly shattered Danny's emotional control. Maria's son had been Danny's unofficial apprentice for 3 months, learning basic martial arts forms after school while helping with maintenance tasks. The boy possessed natural balance and discipline rare in someone so young, but more importantly, he showed the moral character that made martial arts training worthwhile. Miguel reminded Danny painfully of his younger brother Li Wei, killed by Hong Kong triads 23 years ago. Li Wei had been 14, full of dreams and potential, when gang violence claimed him during Danny's early war against organized crime. The guilt of that loss, feeling responsible for bringing danger into his family's life, had driven Danny's crusade against criminal organizations. Now history was repeating with devastating precision. Friday afternoon, Miguel ran home from school with tears in his eyes, bursting into the community center where Danny was repairing damaged equipment. "They followed me," the boy gasped. "The bad men from the gym." Danny knelt to Miguel's eye level, his voice gentle despite internal alarms screaming danger. "What happened?" "They offered me money to give you a message. I said no, but they kept following me, saying things about my mom and you and—" Miguel's voice broke. "Why are they being mean to everyone because of you?" The question cut deeper than any physical blow Danny had ever taken. Through a child's innocent perspective, he saw the truth. His presence had brought danger to people who'd shown him nothing but kindness. His selfish desire for peace was costing innocent people their safety. Maria arrived as Danny was comforting her son, and her expression carried both fear and accusation. "This has to stop," she said quietly. "Whatever these people want from you, maybe you should just give it to them." That evening, Danny sat alone in the damaged meditation garden he'd built with his own hands. The stone benches were cracked, plants trampled, peaceful spaces violated by people who understood only destruction. His FBI handler would relocate him within 48 hours if he made the call. New identity, new city, new chance at anonymous. Peace. The logical choice was obvious. Remove himself from the equation and let the community heal. But Miguel's question haunted him. Why are they being mean to everyone because of you? Because bullies always escalated until someone stopped them. Because criminals viewed restraint as weakness to be exploited. Because running away wouldn't end the harassment. It would teach them that threatening innocence was effective strategy. At 9:15 p.m., Danny made his decision. He found Miguel in the community center's main room, doing homework while his mother worked late. The boy looked up with eyes that still held trust despite the day's fears. "Miguel," Danny said gently, "sometimes good people have to do difficult things to protect what they love. Are you going to fight the bad men? I'm going to make sure they never hurt anyone here again." It wasn't a promise Danny made lightly. He'd spent 6 months building a peaceful life, serving others without violence, healing his own soul through humble service. But some evils couldn't be negotiated with or avoided. They had to be confronted with decisive action. His phone buzzed, with a text from an unknown number. "Tomorrow. Final offer. Or the boy gets hurt too." Danny stared at the message, then deleted it. His peaceful existence was over, but his purpose had never been clearer. The sleeping dragon was fully awake now, and it was very, very angry. Saturday morning arrived with ominous stillness, broken at 8:22 a.m. when Danny surveyed the meditation garden's overnight destruction. The stone benches he'd carefully positioned according to feng shui principles lay shattered. Plants he'd nurtured, for months were trampled into mud. Spray-painted messages covered every surface. Fight, or they all suffer. Maria found him there, recognizing the finality in his posture. After 6 months of observing Danny's quiet strength, she'd learned to read the subtle signs of his emotional state. Today, something fundamental had shifted. "I've decided to call my FBI handler," Danny said without turning around. "Relocation is the only way to protect everyone." Before Maria could respond, the convoy arrived. 3 black SUVs pulled into the community center's parking lot with military precision. Vinny Torino emerged from the center vehicle, his expensive suit and calm demeanor projecting authority that made even distant observers nervous. At 52, Torino had built his criminal empire through careful calculation rather than flashy violence. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his hands manicured, his every gesture suggesting wealth and power. But his cold gray eyes evaluated everything in terms of profit potential, including human lives. "Mr. Yen," Torino called out respectfully, approaching the destroyed garden. "Vincent Torino, I believe we need to talk." Danny turned slowly, his tactical awareness immediately cataloging threats. 8 armed men in professional security positions, multiple escape routes blocked, innocent civilians potentially in crossfire range. This wasn't random harassment. This was a coordinated operation. "I know who you are," Danny replied quietly. Torino's smile was genuinely appreciative. "Then you understand I'm not here for games. I run underground fighting circuits that cater to very exclusive clientele. Your participation would generate unprecedented interest from criminal organizations worldwide." The offer was presented like a business proposition. 3 fights over 6 weeks, carefully choreographed outcomes to maximize betting pools. Danny would lose each match in predetermined fashion, allowing Torino's clients to profit enormously while he received substantial compensation. "When I refuse?" Danny asked. "Look around." Torino gestured at the destroyed garden. "This was just demonstration. I have resources that extend far beyond property damage." 2 of his men dragged Frank Castellano from their vehicle, the 74-year-old veteran bound but conscious. Frank's face showed bruises, but his military bearing remained intact despite obvious fear. "We collected Mr. Castellano from his apartment this morning," Torino explained conversationally. "Insurance, you might say. Proof that I'm serious about this opportunity." Danny's hands clenched involuntarily, but his voice remained controlled. "He's innocent. Everyone's innocent until circumstances make them otherwise." Torino showed cell phone video of Frank in what appeared to be a warehouse. Setting: 3 fights, Danny. Lose them my way, and your friend returns unharmed. Refuse, and we'll discuss terms using more personal leverage. Maria gasped as the implications became clear, but Danny's focus remained laser-sharp on Torino's calculated cruelty. "You have 24 hours, Torino continued. "My tournament begins next Friday. Miss the deadline, and Mr. Castellano learns what happens to people who inconvenience my business operations." The criminal mastermind's confidence was absolute. He'd studied Danny's psychology, identified his protective instincts, and crafted pressure that would break even legendary discipline. As the convoy departed with Frank still captive, Danny stood amid the ruins of his peaceful sanctuary, facing the choice that would define everything: submit to criminal extortion or watch innocent people suffer for his principles. Detective Rosa Martinez arrived at the community center at 10:45 a.m., responding to Maria's increasingly desperate calls about escalating harassment. At 45, Martinez had 15 years of SFPD experience, but nothing had prepared her for investigating crimes involving legendary martial artists and international organized crime. Her personal investment ran deeper than professional duty. Carlos Martinez, her 72-year-old father, had found new purpose at the community center after her mother's death the previous year. The elderly longshoreman attended daily coffee gatherings, participated in veteran support groups, and had formed friendships that helped him navigate grief and loneliness. "These aren't random vandals," Martinez observed, examining the destroyed meditation garden with trained investigative eyes. "This is systematic intimidation with specific objectives." Her database searches revealed disturbing patterns. Derek Kellerman's new associates had connections to Vincent Torino's organization, a criminal network suspected of involvement in human trafficking, money laundering, and underground fighting operations spanning multiple jurisdictions. Mr. Wong, she addressed Danny formally, I need you to understand what you're dealing with. Torino's organization has suspected ties to Chinese triads, Russian bratva, and Mexican cartels. This isn't neighborhood harassment. This is international organized crime. Danny's responses during questioning revealed knowledge that troubled her professional instincts. His understanding of criminal organization tactics, surveillance methods, and pressure techniques suggested either law enforcement background or personal experience with organized crime operations. You're either involved in this world or you've been victimized by it, Martinez concluded. Either way, I need the truth to protect this community. Through community interviews, Martinez pieced together the real story. The humble maintenance worker was actually Donnie Yen, the legendary martial artist whose films had inspired her own childhood dreams of fighting injustice. But more importantly, his presence had attracted criminal attention that threatened everyone around him. Her investigation revealed Torino's legitimate businesses were fronts for extensive criminal operations. Underground fight clubs generated massive illegal gambling profits while serving as recruitment centers for international criminal networks. Human trafficking victims were often fighters coerced into competition through family threats and financial desperation. This is bigger than local harassment, Martinez reported to her captain. We're looking at potential federal RICO violations, but Torino's too careful for standard investigation methods. The case became personal when Martinez received a phone call at 3:30 p.m. from an electronically disguised voice. Detective Martinez, your father enjoys his coffee at the community center every morning. It would be unfortunate if his routine became hazardous. The threat was clear: back off the investigation or watch her own family become collateral damage. Martinez had faced criminal intimidation before, but never involving her elderly father's safety. That evening, she found Carlos at home, preparing for his next day's community center visit. Her father's joy in discussing his new friendships and daily activities made the criminal threat even more personal. Poppy, maybe you should stay home for a few days, she suggested carefully. Why? That place gives me life after your mother died. Danny helps me with my English, Harold teaches me dominoes, Frank shares his war stories. It's my family now. Martinez realized that Torino's criminal organization had weaponized the community's love against itself. They'd identified what Danny cared about and turned it into leverage for criminal profit. Her phone buzzed with updates from fellow officers investigating similar harassment patterns across the city. Torino's network was pressuring multiple targets simultaneously, building towards some larger criminal operation that required Danny's participation. Sitting in her police car outside the community center, Martinez watched elderly patrons hurrying in and out with obvious fear. Her father's second family was being terrorized by criminals who saw their vulnerability as tactical advantage. The choice crystallized with brutal clarity: work within official channels that move too slowly to protect innocent people, or find ways to support the legendary fighter who might be their only hope of stopping this criminal organization. Danny Wong might be their community's janitor, but sometimes communities needed Donnie Yen. The attack came at 3:30 p.m. on Tuesday, during the community center's busiest afternoon programs. 43 children aged 6 to 15 filled the main gymnasium for after-school activities, while elderly patrons gathered in the adjacent multipurpose room for their daily social hour. 8 masked men stormed through multiple entrances, simultaneously, their coordination revealing extensive surveillance and planning. They claimed to be robbers, but their targets were deliberately chosen for maximum psychological impact rather than financial gain. Everyone on the ground. The lead attacker's voice carried authority that froze terrified children and elderly patrons alike. Nobody moves, nobody gets hurt. But hurting people was clearly the objective. The attackers systematically targeted the most vulnerable community members. Harold Kim was shoved to the floor when he tried to shield younger children, his 87-year-old body unable to absorb the impact safely. Mrs. Betty Chan was knocked down while clutching her purse, her frightened whimpers echoing through the gymnasium. Danny heard the commotion from the basement maintenance room and moved immediately, but the attackers had planned for his response. 2 men blocked the stairwell, while others continued terrorizing innocent people upstairs. 12-year-old Miguel Santos displayed courage beyond his years when one attacker threatened 6-year-old Amy Peterson. The boy stepped between the masked man and the crying girl, his martial arts training evident in his protective stance. "Leave her alone." Miguel's voice carried Danny's teachings about protecting those weaker than yourself. The attacker's response was swift and brutal, a backhand that sent Miguel crashing into a folding table, his head striking the metal edge with sickening impact. Blood flowed immediately as the boy collapsed unconscious, his small body terrifyingly still. The attack lasted exactly 4 minutes, but left lasting trauma. 3 elderly patrons required hospitalization. Thousands of dollars in property damage scarred the facilities, and dozens of children would need counseling to process the violence they'd witnessed. Danny arrived as the attackers fled, finding Miguel unconscious and bleeding while Maria screamed for help. The boy's pulse was weak but steady, his breathing shallow but consistent. Emergency medical training from his FBI protection years guided Danny's first aid efforts while sirens approached. At the hospital, doctors confirmed Miguel would recover from his concussion, but the boy's injuries represented something far worse than physical damage. The attackers had crossed every line Danny had drawn. They'd weaponized his community's love against him and hurt a child who reminded him of his murdered brother. "Why did they hurt everyone, Sifu?" Miguel asked weakly when he regained consciousness. His young eyes filled with confusion and pain. Danny sat beside the hospital bed, his peaceful facade completely shattered. The question cut through every rationalization, every attempt at diplomatic solution, every hope that this conflict could be resolved without violence. Because some people understood only force. Because criminals viewed restraint as weakness. To exploit. Because his 6 months of humble service had been destroyed by people who saw kindness as vulnerability. "Sometimes," Danny said quietly, his voice carrying steel that hadn't been there since Hong Kong, "good people must become dangerous to protect what they love." Maria found them there at midnight, her son sleeping peacefully while Danny maintained vigil beside the bed. The transformation in his posture was complete. The gentle janitor had been replaced by something harder, more focused, infinitely more dangerous. "They want me to fight in Torino's tournament," Danny said without looking up. 3 matches, predetermined outcomes, massive criminal betting pools. "And if you refuse?" Danny's eyes met hers with terrible clarity. "They'll hurt more innocents until I comply. Frank is just the beginning." The sleeping dragon was fully awake now, and its fury burned with the cold fire of absolute moral certainty. The decision crystallized at 9:15 p.m. in Miguel's hospital room as Danny watched the unconscious boy's steady breathing. 12 years old, protecting someone smaller and weaker, hurt because Danny's presence had brought danger to innocent people. The parallels to his brother Li Wei's death were too painful and too precise to ignore. Detective Martinez arrived with updates that confirmed Danny's worst fears. "Torino's organization has been escalating pressure on multiple fronts," she reported quietly. "Similar attacks on businesses connected to anyone who might support you. This isn't ending until you give them what they want. Or until I end it permanently," Danny replied. Maria looked up from her son's bedside, recognizing the steel in his voice. "What are you planning?" Danny's explanation was methodical and terrifying in its tactical precision. He would enter Torino's underground tournament as demanded, but not to lose predetermined fights for criminal profit. Instead, he would systematically destroy the entire criminal organization from within while gathering evidence for federal prosecution. The tournament provides access to criminals from multiple international organizations who are otherwise untouchable, he continued. Torino's operation is too well protected for traditional law enforcement approaches, but from inside, with the right coordination. Martinez understood immediately. "You're talking about using yourself as bait for the largest organized crime takedown in California history. I'm talking about making sure Miguel never has to face these people again." Agent Sarah Kim arrived from Los Angeles within 3 hours, Danny's original FBI handler, bringing tactical support equipment and federal authorization for the operation. At 48, Kim had overseen Danny's witness protection for 2 years, but she'd never seen him request return to active combat operations. "You spent 6 months building a peaceful life," Kim observed. "Are you sure you want to throw that away for what might be a suicide mission?" Danny's response was to show her photographs on his phone. Miguel in the hospital, Frank's kidnapping video, elderly community members terrorized by professional criminals. This isn't about what I want anymore. The operational planning consumed the entire night. FBI surveillance teams would monitor the tournament location while Danny wore recording devices to document criminal activities. International law enforcement agencies would coordinate arrests based on intelligence gathered from inside Torino's organization. The risk is enormous, Kim warned. If they discover you're working with federal agents, then I'll handle it the way I used to in Hong Kong, Danny replied with quiet finality. Maria watched the transformation with growing understanding. The gentle janitor who'd served her community was disappearing, replaced by someone harder and infinitely more dangerous. But this wasn't betrayal of his peaceful principles. This was their ultimate expression. You're doing this to protect us, she realized. I'm doing this because running away only teaches them that threatening innocent people works, Danny corrected. Some evils can't be negotiated with or avoided. They have to be stopped. At dawn, Danny made 3 crucial phone calls. First, accepting Torino's tournament invitation with apparent reluctance. Second, contacting Master Wong in Hong Kong to request emergency backup if federal coordination failed. Third, leaving a voicemail for Miguel that would be played when the boy woke up. When you're feeling better, the bad men will be gone, his recorded voice promised. Not because they chose to leave, but because someone made sure they could never hurt anyone again. The hospital room fell quiet as Danny prepared for war. 6 months of peace were ending, but his purpose had never been clearer. Sometimes the greatest act of love was choosing violence to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The sleeping dragon was awake, and it was time to remind the world why legends became legendary. Outside, Vincent Torino was already making international calls, spreading word through criminal networks that Donnie Yen would fight in his tournament. The betting pools would be astronomical, but Torino had no idea he was actually arranging his own destruction. The war was about to begin. The converted warehouse in Oakland's industrial district pulsed with criminal energy at 7 p.m. Friday evening. Danny approached the fortress-like structure, its exterior walls reinforced with steel plating and surveillance cameras tracking his every step. Armed guards at multiple checkpoints confirmed his identity with the reverence reserved for legends. Inside, the transformation was breathtaking and terrifying. What had been a mundane storage facility now housed a sophisticated fighting venue with a central octagon surrounded by tiered seating for 200 of the world's most dangerous criminals. The lighting was professional grade, the sound system crystal clear, the betting infrastructure capable of handling 9-figure transactions. Vincent Torino greeted Danny personally, his expensive suit and calculated courtesy masking the predatory nature beneath. Mr. Yuan, welcome to the pinnacle of underground combat sports. Tonight, you'll face opponents worthy of your legendary status. The audience represented a criminal United Nations. Chinese triad leaders sat alongside Russian Bratva bosses. Mexican cartel lieutenants shared betting information with Japanese Yakuza representatives. Every major organized crime syndicate in the Pacific Rim had sent representatives with authorization to bet astronomical sums. The initial betting pools exceed $50 million, Torino explained proudly, leading Danny through corridors lined with security personnel. Your first fight alone has generated more interest than any event in underground fighting history. Danny's recording device, disguised as a medical alert bracelet, captured every word while FBI surveillance teams monitored from strategic positions outside the warehouse. The criminal conversations surrounding him would provide evidence to dismantle multiple international organizations. His preparation room was spartanly equipped but comfortable, clearly designed to keep fighters calm before potentially fatal combat. Danny used the isolation to center himself mentally, preparing for violence he'd hoped never to embrace again. The tournament bracket displayed on a wall monitor showed 8 fighters in single elimination format. Danny's first opponent was Anton Kozlov, a 280-pound Russian enforcer whose reputation included killing 3 opponents in sanctioned matches and countless more in criminal operations. Kozlov specializes in ending fights quickly, Torino mentioned casually. His employers preferred demonstrations of absolute dominance rather than extended competitions. Through the preparation room's one-way window, Danny observed the criminal. audience settling into their seats with anticipation normally reserved for gladiatorial combat. Cell phones recorded everything while betting applications processed millions in illegal wagers. Agent Kim's voice crackled through his nearly invisible earpiece. We have visual confirmation of 17 international fugitives in attendance. Whatever happens in there, you're generating intelligence gold. Danny's transformation was complete as he prepared for his entrance. The gentle janitor had been buried beneath tactical necessity, replaced by the warrior who'd once dismantled entire criminal organizations through systematic violence. At exactly 8 p.m., the announcer's voice boomed through the warehouse. Ladies and gentlemen, the legend himself, Donnie Yen. Danny emerged into blinding lights and thunderous applause from criminals who viewed him as entertainment rather than executioner. They had no idea they were witnessing the beginning of their own destruction. The octagon waited, gleaming under professional lighting, as Anton Kozlov entered from the opposite side with murderous confidence. Two philosophies were about to collide: criminal brutality versus disciplined justice. The legend had returned. To war, and there would be consequences. Anton Kozlov entered the octagon like a predator claiming territory, his massive frame casting shadows across the canvas as 200 criminals cheered for blood. At 280 pounds of steroid-enhanced muscle, the Russian enforcer had earned his reputation through systematic brutality rather than technical skill. "You are old legend," Kozlov growled in broken English, flexing arms covered in prison tattoos. "I am new reality. Tonight, I make my own legend from your bones." Danny remained motionless in the center, his breathing controlled, his stance deceptively casual. The contrast was deliberately stark. Youth versus experience, brute force versus refined technique, criminal violence versus disciplined justice. The betting reached fever pitch as odds shifted wildly. Torino's clients had wagered fortunes on the outcome, but none understood they were witnessing tactical genius preparing to dismantle systematic brutality. Kozlov opened with a charging bull rush, throwing wild haymakers designed to end the fight with single devastating impacts. His approach relied on intimidation and overwhelming force, tactics that had crushed lesser opponents but revealed fundamental misunderstanding of martial arts principles. Danny's response demonstrated why legends became legendary. Using perfect Wing Chun theory, he redirected Kozlov's charging momentum while simultaneously striking nerve clusters that disrupted the Russian's motor functions. Each movement was surgical in precision, targeting specific pressure points that gradually shut down Kozlov's nervous system. The technique was so advanced that most spectators missed its subtlety. They saw Kozlov suddenly stumbling, his left arm going numb, his balance compromised by attacks they couldn't even perceive. Danny's strikes appeared gentle, almost accidental, but each carried decades of conditioning and perfect anatomical knowledge. "What is happening?" Kozlov gasped, his confidence evaporating as his own body betrayed him. Danny's answer was another precise nerve strike that rendered the Russian's right leg temporarily paralyzed. The massive enforcer crashed to the canvas, his steroid-enhanced physique useless against techniques that attacked the nervous system rather than relying on brute damage. The crowd fell silent, their bloodthirsty anticipation replaced by confused awe. This wasn't the brutal slugfest they'd expected, but something approaching martial arts artistry. Danny finished with a gentle pressure point technique that rendered Kozlov unconscious without permanent damage, a demonstration of ultimate control that confused the criminal audience. They'd come to see violence, but witnessed restraint that was somehow more intimidating than any brutality. The victory sent shockwaves through Torino's organization. Betting patterns had assumed competitive violence, but Danny's systematic dismantling of a supposedly dangerous opponent suggested they were dealing with something beyond their understanding. His second fight came immediately against Ricardo El Martillo Mendez, a Mexican cartel enforcer enhanced with military-grade stimulants. This opponent showed more tactical awareness, using combination attacks and defensive positioning that revealed formal training. Danny responded by switching fighting styles mid-combat, flowing from Wing Chun's efficiency to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu's ground control when Mendez attempted takedowns, then transitioning to Muay Thai's devastating striking when distance management became crucial. The criminal audience watched in growing amazement as Danny demonstrated mastery of multiple martial arts disciplines, adapting fluidly to whatever each moment required. His age became an advantage rather than limitation, 61 years of accumulated knowledge allowing him to counter every technique with superior responses. Mendez's defeat was even more comprehensive than Kozlov's, leaving the cartel enforcer conscious but completely helpless as Danny controlled every aspect of their ground engagement. Between fights, Danny used his access to explore the warehouse's layout, locating where Frank and other trafficking victims were being held while his recording device captured incriminating conversations throughout the criminal audience. Agent Kim's voice whispered through his earpiece. We're documenting enough federal crimes to prosecute half the Pacific Rim's organized crime leadership. Keep going. The tournament was ahead of schedule, but Danny was just getting started. Derek Kellerman paced his preparation area like a caged animal, his hands wrapped in illegal modifications while stimulant drugs coursed through his system. 3 weeks of intensive training with former Special Forces mercenaries had prepared him for this moment, his chance at redemption against the legend who destroyed his career. Remember, Marcus Webb instructed, checking the concealed weapons hidden in Kellerman's fighting gear. He's old, he's tired from 2 fights, and he's not expecting you to be enhanced this way. Use everything: the weighted gloves, the brass knuckles in your wraps, the razor blade in your mouth guard. Whatever it takes. The corruption was complete. Weighted gloves added devastating impact to every strike. Brass knuckles concealed in hand wraps could shatter bones, and a razor blade taped inside his mouth guard allowed cutting opponents during clinches. Kellerman had abandoned any pretense of legitimate competition for pure criminal violence. The crowd's energy was electric as he entered the octagon. Their initial confusion at Danny's technical victories had transformed into bloodthirsty anticipation. Surely the younger, stronger, enhanced fighter would provide the brutal entertainment they'd paid to witness. This time it's different, old man, Kellerman announced for the cameras, his pupils dilated from stimulants. No more mercy, no more games. I'm going to break you piece by piece. Danny observed his former opponent with tactical detachment, immediately recognizing the chemical enhancement and hidden weapons. Kellerman's movements were faster, more aggressive, but also more erratic, the telltale signs of artificial improvement that came with significant vulnerabilities. When the fight began, Kellerman's approach was completely different from their community center encounter. Gone was the flashy showboating, replaced by calculated brutality designed to exploit perceived weaknesses in an aging opponent. Eye pokes, groin strikes, illegal holds. Every technique was designed to circumvent traditional martial arts defense, while the corrupt referee ignored violations. Kellerman's enhanced speed and hidden weapons initially created problems that hadn't existed. In their first meeting, Danny appeared to struggle, taking damage and seeming to slow down as the fight progressed. The criminal audience grew excited, thinking they were finally witnessing the aging legend's limitations against modern enhancement and tactical preparation. But Danny's apparent weakness was strategic deception. While absorbing punishment, he was analyzing Kellerman's new capabilities, cataloging the drug effects, identifying the hidden weapons, studying the enhanced techniques. His recording device captured every illegal modification for federal evidence while he prepared his systematic response. The turning point came when Kellerman attempted to use his concealed razor blade during a clinch. Danny's counterattack revealed he'd been controlling the fight's pace from the beginning, using Kellerman's overconfidence to gather intelligence while positioning for decisive action. Advanced pressure point techniques learned from dim Mac masters came into play as Danny systematically shut down Kellerman's nervous system. Each strike targeted specific nerve clusters, gradually paralyzing the enhanced fighter while simultaneously disarming him of every hidden weapon. The criminal audience watched in horrified fascination as Danny exposed every illegal modification, removing weighted gloves, extracting brass knuckles from hand wraps, confiscating the razor blade from Kellerman's mouth guard. The systematic disarmament was more devastating than any knockout. Kellerman's defeat was complete and public. Enhanced by the most advanced performance drugs, equipped with illegal weapons, trained by military specialists, and supported by criminal corruption, none of it mattered against true martial arts. Mastery combined with tactical intelligence. As Kellerman lay unconscious, all his illegal equipment displayed for the cameras. Vincent Torino realized his carefully orchestrated tournament was spiraling beyond his control. The aging legend wasn't just winning fights. He was systematically exposing the criminal corruption that funded Torino's entire operation. But the worst was yet to come. Danny's semifinal opponent would test everything he'd learned about the intersection of martial arts and justice. The warehouse's basement revealed the full scope of Torino's criminal empire as Danny navigated through service corridors during the tournament's intermission. Using blueprints provided by FBI surveillance, he moved with tactical precision while avoiding the security forces hunting for him above. What he discovered was worse than anticipated. Dozens of trafficking victims from multiple countries were held in makeshift cells, their passports confiscated, their freedom sold to criminal organizations for labor and forced competition. Money-counting operations occupied entire rooms, processing millions in illegal gambling profits. Drug distribution centers prepared shipments destined for street sales across California. Danny located Frank Castellano in a secured basement area, finding his friend injured but alert after 3 days of captivity. The 74-year-old veteran had maintained his military bearing despite obvious fear and physical abuse. Danny, Frank's relief was palpable. I knew you'd come. These bastards have been bragging about forcing you to fight. Are you hurt badly? Nothing a Korean War veteran can't handle, Frank replied with forced bravado, then leaned closer. But I've been listening. There are at least 30 other victims here. Kids, women, men who got grabbed for owing money or refusing to fight. This operation is massive. Tom was critical. Danny's absence from the tournament area would be noticed soon, but he couldn't leave innocent people in criminal hands. Using lock-picking skills learned during his Hong Kong operations, he began systematically opening cells while organizing victims for coordinated escape. The rescue operation became a race against time as Torino's security forces realized what was happening. Danny's approach was precise and non-lethal when possible, but ruthlessly efficient when guards threatened victim safety. His complete skill set was revealed: military-style tactics, electronics disabling, close-quarters combat techniques that went far beyond traditional martial arts. The gentle janitor and legendary fighter were both facades for something more comprehensive: a man trained to dismantle criminal organizations through any means necessary. There's an exit through the loading dock, he explained to the frightened victims, most speaking languages he'd learned during international operations. FBI agents are waiting 2 blocks north. Stay together, move quietly, and don't look back. Frank, despite his injuries, helped coordinate the evacuation while Danny handled security threats. The old veteran's military training proved invaluable, as they organized 47 victims into manageable groups for extraction. The operation's complexity increased when some victims were too traumatized to move, others were injured, and several were children who required special handling. Danny's protective instincts, already heightened by Miguel's hospitalization, drove him to ensure every innocent person reached safety. I'm not leaving without you, Frank declared as the last group prepared to escape. You have to. If Torino discovers what happened before I finish upstairs, all of this was for nothing. The warehouse's intercom crackled to life as Torino's voice echoed through the building. Mr. Yen, your absence has been noted. Return to your preparation area immediately, or we'll discuss terms using more personal leverage. On security monitors, Danny watched armed guards taking positions around the tournament venue while others searched the basement levels. His window for completing the rescue was closing rapidly. The final extraction required split-second timing. Danny guided the last group of victims through the loading dock, while simultaneously engaging security forces who discovered the breach. His movements were fluid and lethal, a master craftsman using every tool at his disposal to protect innocent lives. As sirens wailed in the distance and FBI units moved to secure the rescued victims, Danny knew his cover was blown. Torino would be expecting him for the tournament final, but now their confrontation would be about far more than predetermined fight outcomes. The warehouse's basement was empty of victims, but Danny and Frank remained trapped as security forces. Sealed all exits. The rescue was complete, but the most dangerous part of the mission was just beginning. Torino's voice boomed through the intercom one final time. The tournament finale will proceed as scheduled. with or without your cooperation. The tournament finale's atmosphere crackled with tension as Danny emerged from the basement to face an unexpected opponent. Instead of another criminal enforcer, Tommy Chin stood in the octagon, 34 years old, scarred by violence, and radiating the bitter energy of a student gone wrong. Sifu, Tommy said mockingly, using the respectful term with deliberate disrespect. 15 years since you threw me out of your school. Did you think I'd forgotten? The criminal audience buzzed with confusion, sensing personal drama that transcended their betting pools. This wasn't the predetermined spectacle they'd anticipated, but something far more dangerous, a master confronting his greatest failure. Made manifest, Danny's memories flooded back to Hong Kong, 1995. Tommy had been his most promising student, naturally gifted with perfect balance and lightning reflexes. But he'd become obsessed with using martial arts for violence and revenge rather than defense and discipline. You taught me Wing Chun's principles, Tommy continued, circling with predatory grace, then denied me the killing techniques when I needed them most. My family was murdered by triads while I had only defensive skills to protect them. The flashback was brutal in its clarity. Danny had refused to teach Tommy the deadlier applications of martial arts, recognizing the darkness growing in his student's heart. When Tommy demanded lethal techniques for revenge against his family's killers, Danny had expelled him from training entirely. So, I learned those techniques elsewhere, Tommy snarled, assuming a fighting stance that perverted everything Danny had taught him. Triads paid well for a Wing Chun practitioner willing to kill. I became everything you said martial arts shouldn't be. The fight that followed was deeply personal, each exchange carrying years of philosophical conflict. Tommy's technique showed master-level training corrupted by criminal applications. He knew Danny's style intimately, but lacked the spiritual discipline that made it truly effective. You created me, Tommy accused between combinations. Your moral superiority killed my family. Danny's response was controlled devastation. Using Tommy's own aggressive momentum against him, he demonstrated why true martial arts mastery required moral foundation. Each defensive technique flowed into perfect counters that systematically broke down Tommy's corrupted approach. I taught you that martial arts without wisdom becomes mere violence, Danny replied, deflecting a vicious elbow strike. You chose to prove me right. The crowd watched transfixed as philosophy battled through physical combat. Tommy represented martial arts corrupted by anger and revenge, while Danny embodied discipline tempered by protective purpose. Tommy's downfall came through his own bitterness. Rage made him predictable, hatred telegraphed his intentions, and the absence of moral restraint left him vulnerable to techniques that required perfect balance between power and control. Danny's finishing move was simultaneously devastating and merciful, a pressure point combination that rendered Tommy unconscious while simultaneously treating old injuries the criminal lifestyle had inflicted. Even defeating his failed student became an act of healing rather than destruction. As Tommy collapsed, his breathing regulated and his old training injuries mysteriously relieved, Danny knelt beside him. It's never too late to choose a better path, he whispered. The criminal audience sat in stunned silence, having witnessed something beyond their understanding. Justice delivered through mercy, strength expressed through restraint. But Torino's voice cut through the moment, touching reunion. Now let's discuss the real finale. Vincent Torino's true nature emerged as the tournament's illusion of control shattered completely. Gone was the sophisticated businessman facade, replaced by desperate criminal fury as he realized his elaborate scheme was collapsing around him. You destroyed everything, Torino screamed, abandoning all pretense as FBI sirens wailed outside. The warehouse. 40 years of building this empire, and you've ruined it in one night. 8 armed enforcers surrounded the octagon, while Torino himself entered the cage carrying both a pistol and a combat knife. The pretense of sporting competition was over. This was now survival combat with lethal weapons against multiple opponents. Kill him slowly, Torino ordered his men. Make sure the cameras capture every moment. If I'm going down, the world will watch Donnie Yen die screaming. Frank Castellano was dragged into the octagon as a human shield, the injured veteran bound and positioned where Danny's defensive movements would be restricted. Torino's tactical thinking was sound. Even legendary fighters struggled when innocent. Lives constrained their options. Danny's response revealed why legends transcended normal limitations. The ensuing battle showcased the complete range of his martial arts mastery while protecting Frank's life. Wing Chun's centerline theory allowed him to handle multiple attackers simultaneously. Bruce Lee's concepts of adaptation and flow enabled seamless transitions between different martial arts styles, and traditional kung fu weapons techniques transformed the octagon structure into defensive tools. Using the cage walls for leverage, Danny executed spinning kicks that cleared multiple opponents while maintaining positioning to shield Frank. A broken piece of the octagon's frame became a short staff, extending his reach and providing impact. Weapons against armed opponents. The criminal audience watched in horrified fascination as 8 professional killers were systematically defeated by a man protecting his friend while constrained within a confined space. Each technique demonstrated not just skill, but the wisdom to apply lethal knowledge with precise restraint. Torino's desperation grew as his enforcers fell. "You think you're some kind of hero?" he snarled, pressing his knife against Frank's throat. "I've killed dozens of people. What makes you think I won't add you to the list?" "Because you're not a warrior," Danny replied calmly, his stance perfectly balanced despite the surrounding chaos. "You're a businessman who uses violence for profit. When profit disappears, so does your courage." The psychological assessment proved accurate. Torino's criminal empire was built on intimidation and systematic exploitation, not personal combat skills. Faced with genuine martial arts mastery, his confidence crumbled into panicked aggression. Danny's final technique was poetry in motion, a simultaneous disarming maneuver that removed both weapons while rendering Torino unconscious through precise nerve pressure. The entire sequence lasted 3 seconds and demonstrated why true martial arts mastery appeared effortless when properly applied. As FBI agents stormed the warehouse and arrested the remaining criminals, Danny untied Frank while checking for serious injuries. The old veteran was battered but conscious, his military dignity intact despite 3 days of captivity. "Is it over?" Frank asked weakly. Danny looked around at the unconscious criminals, the approaching federal agents, and the evidence that would dismantle multiple international crime organizations. "It's over." But his expression carried the weight of someone who'd returned to violence after years of peace. Victory had been necessary, justice had been served, but the cost to his own soul remained to be calculated. Outside, Agent Kim coordinated the largest organized crime arrest in California history, while Danny sat beside his rescued friend and contemplated the price of being a legend who could never truly retire from war. Dawn broke over San Francisco Bay as FBI agents completed their sweep of Torino's warehouse complex, the rising sun illuminating the largest organized crime bust in California history. Agent Sarah Kim stood among evidence tables groaning under the weight of seized materials, financial records, weapon caches, trafficking documents, and recorded conversations that would reshape international law enforcement efforts. 127 victims freed, $73 million in criminal assets seized, 89 arrests across multiple jurisdictions, Kim reported to Danny as paramedics finished treating Frank Castellano's injuries. "The intelligence you gathered will prosecute crimes spanning 3 continents." The scope of success was staggering. Chinese triad leaders, Russian Bratva bosses, Mexican cartel lieutenants, and Japanese Yakuza representatives, all captured in a single coordinated operation that had seemed impossible through traditional law enforcement methods. Derek Kellerman faced federal charges but cooperated with prosecutors, his testimony revealing the full extent of Torino's criminal network in exchange for a reduced sentence. The former social media champion would serve time, but his cooperation would help convict dozens of more dangerous criminals. Tommy Chin's fate proved more complex. His criminal resume warranted life imprisonment, but Danny's intervention and testimony about rehabilitation possibilities led to a different outcome: FBI protection and a chance to rebuild his life away from organized crime, contingent on continued cooperation with international investigations. "He was my student once," Danny explained to puzzled federal prosecutors. "Everyone deserves a chance at redemption." Frank Castellano returned home to hero's welcome from his Korean War veteran friends, who treated his survival of kidnapping as another battle won through military courage. The old soldier's ordeal had revealed the strength that service members carried long after their formal duties ended. Detective Rosa Martinez received commendations for her investigative work and developed a new specialty in organized crime cases. Her father, Carlos, returned safely to the community center, his daily routine protected by the very legend who'd been serving coffee beside him for months. The personal aftermath proved more challenging for Danny. 3 days of testimony to federal prosecutors, international law enforcement agencies, and congressional committees left him drained from reliving violence he'd hoped to leave buried. Master Wong arrived from Hong Kong to help process the psychological transition back to civilian life. The elderly martial arts master found Danny in the hospital chapel, sitting quietly while Miguel Santos recovered down the hall. "You've returned to peace after war once again," Master Wong observed. "But this time feels different. Because I chose violence to protect people I love," Danny replied. "In Hong Kong, it was duty. Here, it was personal. The highest use of martial arts. Skill," Master Wong said approvingly. "Not for glory or profit, but for those who cannot protect themselves." Miguel's recovery became Danny's focus during the aftermath. The boy's physical injuries healed quickly, but his questions about violence and justice required careful answers. From someone who'd walked both paths. "Did you hurt the bad men, Sifu?" Miguel asked during one of Danny's visits. "I stopped them from hurting anyone else," Danny replied carefully. "Sometimes good people must be strong enough to protect others, but wise enough to know when strength becomes cruelty." The media attention was overwhelming but brief. Danny declined all interview requests, commercial endorsements, and Hollywood offers. His legend status was secured, but his commitment to humble service remained unchanged. 3 days after the raid, Agent Kim presented Danny with a choice that would determine his future: return to witness protection in a new location with a fresh identity, or remain in San Francisco under his real name with federal protection. The decision would reshape everything. 3 months later, on a sunny Tuesday morning, Danny arrived at the rebuilt Sunset District Community Center for his first day back as maintenance supervisor. The sign outside now read, "Daniel Yen, Maintenance Supervisor," but his duties remained unchanged. Honest work in service of people he'd grown to love. The community had embraced his true identity while respecting his desire for privacy. No media circus, no commercial exploitation, just neighbors protecting someone who'd protected them. Tourists and martial arts enthusiasts occasionally visited, but locals politely redirected attention while maintaining Danny's peaceful environment. The center itself had been transformed through donated money and volunteer labor from across the Bay Area. The new meditation garden, designed by Danny and built by Harold Kim's Korean War veterans, featured a bronze plaque reading, "In honor of those who serve others without recognition." Frank Castellano had returned to work alongside Danny, their friendship deepened by shared survival of violence. The old veteran's recovery was complete, but he moved with new appreciation for each peaceful day. Their morning coffee conversations now included stories from Danny's legendary past, shared between friends who'd faced danger together. Miguel Santos bounded through the center's doors at 3:30 p.m., fully recovered from his injuries and eager for his martial arts lesson. But Danny's teaching had evolved. Less emphasis on fighting techniques, more focus on discipline, patience, and the responsibility that came with strength. "Remember," Danny instructed as Miguel practiced basic forms. "Martial arts is about protecting others, not proving yourself. The strongest people are often the gentlest because they don't need to demonstrate their power." Maria Santos watched from her office, now promoted to Regional Director of Community Centers. Her experience with the crisis had taught her valuable lessons about security and vulnerability that she applied throughout the city's social services network. Detective Martinez visited regularly, both to check on her father Carlos and to update Danny on ongoing prosecutions. Vincent Torino had received life in prison without parole, his criminal empire completely dismantled. International arrest. Warrants were still being executed based on evidence gathered during the tournament. Justice served, Martinez reported during one visit. "Every single person who threatened this community is either in prison or under federal investigation. The afternoon routine was familiar and comforting. Children's programs, elderly social hours, quiet maintenance work that kept essential services functioning. Danny moved through his duties with the same methodical precision he'd shown for months, but now community members understood the depth of skill and dedication their janitor brought to simple tasks. Harold Kim approached at 4 p.m. with other veterans, presenting Danny with a handmade trophy, a simple wooden base supporting a small bronze figure in martial arts stance. The inscription read, "Best Maintenance Supervisor Ever, Harold Kim and the Korean War Veterans Association." "We wanted something more elaborate," Harold explained, "but figured you'd prefer simple recognition among friends." Danny accepted the trophy with genuine emotion, understanding that this moment represented everything he'd sought: recognition for service rather than violence, appreciation from people who valued character over celebrity. As afternoon light streamed through the center's windows, Danny found himself in the meditation garden during the quiet hour before evening programs. Children played safely in the distance while elderly patrons shared stories and laughter. The community he protected through violence now surrounded him with peace. His reflection in the garden's small pond showed a man transformed once again, no longer the hidden legend or the reluctant warrior, but someone who'd found his true calling in serving others while maintaining the strength to protect them when necessary. The sleeping dragon could rest peacefully now, confident that justice and mercy could coexist in the same heart. If you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.